Good morning, everyone, and thanks ever so much for joining this morning's webcast on a very exciting time in Arcserve's timescales. We're actually bringing out a brand new cloud backup technology. It's our Arcserve Cloud Direct solution. Your presenters today will be myself, Tony Parry, and Charlie Smith. If you have any questions, then please feel free to send them via the chat. There is a questions button, or hold them for the end, and we'll field everything at the verbally at the end of the call. Okay, thank you very much. So, just to give you a background to what we're going to cover, there'll be a background to the market, so what's happening and why this is going to become available now, along with a high-level overview, so very high level, of the technology. We'll then go into a bit more of a deep dive with Charlie giving you a solution overview and a demonstration. And then at the end, I'll give you some kind of indication on how we license the technology. So if I think about the IT market, and in particular the data protection or disaster recovery and business continuity and all these kind of areas, I got to thinking it's very much like the car industry, and you know, a lot of us understand motor racing and Formula One cars, and there's always a need for a competitive edge. Much like you, our prospects and customers, you need a competitive edge against your competition in the market. And the Formula One teams, they spend millions upon millions to make sure they've got that slightest bit of extra speed, that slightest bit of extra handling around the corner, and the things that we see that they have. Obviously, the tyre technology, 1 year to the next, is always enhanced. We're seeing things like the traction control and launch control coming into systems. We're seeing that the actual materials that they're using are ever getting better. But it costs an absolute fortune. And we in our everyday lives, you know, wouldn't it be lovely if we were able to have some of the things that they have? But historically, it's been far too expensive for us to have. But that's not really strictly true, is it? I think it's fair to say, I think it was Renault came out with the first one, but you now see in everyday life keyless cars, just like with Formula Ones. You see your traction control, your ABS. You see a lot more things that actually were once purely available within the elite at the highest price, now available for us as everyday users. And a lot of those things we now deem as necessity rather than just a wish list. You know, the fact that we can deal with going around corners a lot more safely, that we can stop very fast. These things are kind of standard requirements, and that's much the same as you in your IT. The things that were once prevalent in just the enterprise businesses are now things that we absolutely expect. They're not something that we wish for. They're something that we need. And drivers like GDPR, like corporate legislation, they are driving us to need everything a lot faster, to be able to stop quicker, to be able to do everything at the right speed so that we can remain competitive. So taking that into consideration, in order to achieve what the enterprise businesses have, but in a fashion that any level of business can actually adopt, we need to take a more layered approach. And this is what Arcserve are beginning to do a lot more and a lot more efficiently. If you look at it, you've got data protection engines that allow you to protect multiple different systems at different levels with different levels of security. The deployment could be in different ways, whether it's to a cloud, to an appliance, to systems that are on-premise, and then building up to the different, what we call RPOs and RTOs. You know, what level of time do you need to be able to get back up and running? How much data are you prepared to lose? No two systems are the same in a business, and should you be paying extortionate amounts of money to protect a file and print server in the same way you would, say, a business critical SQL system? To what degree are different legislations and legal requirements forcing the need to maybe have long-term archiving? Pretty well every organization has some kind of overlaying body that stipulates you must store data for X period of times. But there are different requirements on the different systems, And having a layered approach allows you to be able to put the right technology at the right time in the right place. And that's what Arcserve are now able to deliver. And the way that we do that is we've come to market historically with a software-only solution. People are able to use our technology, whether it's licensed per server, per terabyte of protected data, or per socket, which happens to be the simplest and most common mechanism. Within that, we're able to allow you to protect systems either to a disk or to a tape for long-term retention, or into the cloud. We protect both physical and virtual, whether it's Hyper-V or VMware, whether it's Windows servers or Linux. And we have the ability to even take that into Microsoft's Office 365, allowing you to either back up or archive the likes of your Exchange that's in Office 365 with fully legally compliant email archiving that allows you to keep legally admissible emails should you be in a situation where you need to use them in a court of law. And that's all available from our software licensing. We then launched a few years ago our first range of appliances, basically a server in a box, started from 3 terabytes up to 30, now available from 4 to 80 terabytes with up to 40 terabyte expansion with the use of an expansion shelf. It comes with unlimited installation of our software for protecting data to that device for disk image-based backup, with software upgrades should you want to allow it to act as a virtual tape library or as a stand-in for our replication technology. And this has had a huge uptake in the market because the consolidation of software and hardware in one technology without the overhead of having to buy your own hardware and software and integrate it is very viable in the market. And this has been a great growth area for us. It incorporates replication, allowing you to replicate either between appliances or to our software instance. Both this and our software can allow you to replicate into a cloud environment should you have the storage and compute. And it also comes with Hyper-V built in, so it could act as a stand-in server for any environment. But what we found is there was a gap in the market, an area where a lot of our customers were kind of crying out for an alternative technology, something where there may be limited amounts of IT staff on premise. A good example of this is, if you said on average customers were increasing their data 50% year on year, and they've got 10 terabytes of data today, next year they're going to have 15 terabytes. The following year they're going to have 22.5 terabytes. Realistically, is IT and the IT resources going to more than double within 2 years to accommodate this rapid growth within the environment? And the reality is no. Most IT departments are staying with the same number of staff or decreasing. So people have to do more with less resources. And there's more of a requirement for being able to take that key element, albeit mundane, of backing up and protecting your systems without as much hand-holding from IT departments. And this is where Arcserve Cloud Direct comes in, the ability to back up directly to a cloud, so you've got an off-premise copy of your systems, and in the event of a disaster, be able to spin up a system in the cloud and carry on running, but without having the overhead on-premise that the IT staff really unnecessarily need to deal with. So I mentioned when I was talking about the car analogy, we today want, it's a case of need rather than want, the features that were once prevalent for the enterprise environments. And the service level agreements that were once only expected at enterprise, those service levels are expected at every organization today. We're in a real competitive situation, and this is where Arcserve UDP Cloud Direct comes in. So what we've done is we've brought out this new technology. It's really born out of a backup as a service and DR as a service requirement. It allows people to have very, very fast failover of an environment with the DR as a service, meaning that we can stand up a system in our data center and have you up and running very quickly. It's ideal for small and medium organizations, as well as remote offices or branch offices of enterprises, where maybe there's a limited amount of IT staff, You don't need hardware on-premise, which is a real key factor. And you can actually recover to anywhere. So should you have a catastrophic event, perhaps you live in the Somerset region and are affected by floods, you need to recover, but obviously your building, your premises are underwater. You can recover the systems to anywhere you want. And it has military-grade security. People are worried about the security aspects. We have all of that built in. So some of the highlights of our cloud, and this is, like I say, very high level. The solution has been available in the US for a number of years, with data centers on the east and west coast, California and New Jersey. And we've just opened up a UK data center in Manchester, and it has the fully audited environment that you would expect. It's totally managed and operated by Arcserve. No third party has access to it. It is purely Arcserve and the Arcserve agreements that are applicable to it. As you'd expect, it's standard-based, and the actual architecture that we've put in place is very stringent and very expensive. We've made sure that it has the full integrity and security, including 256-bit encryption built in. It's multi-tenant, so if you have multiple environments you want to manage under one umbrella, so perhaps for councils where they have multiple sites, they may want to manage them so they have their own unique environment, but they're managed under one umbrella. That's fully multi-tenant. And totally standard within the industry compliance. And if you think about Sarbanes-Oxley in America, one of the strictest regulations in the world, we have all those mandates covered. So what I'm going to do now is pass you over to Charlie Smith. He'll take you now into the deep dive. As I said, I was just going to give you the high level. Now you have the deep dive and the demonstration, and then we'll follow up with the pricing. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Good morning, everyone. I'm Charlie Smith. So what I'm going to do now is kind of go a little bit deeper into the technology, and we're also going to go through a product demonstration as well. So as Tony alluded to in his earlier slides, we specifically have two services that we offer our customers. The first is a backup as a service. So for organizations that want to provide an off-site capability and a facility to protect their data and hold it in the cloud, but then also be able to access that data, search it and retrieve it and recover it back on site, we provide the backup as a service. And that automatically backs up and transfers your data safely off site. It's very easy to set up. You'll see the new UDP Cloud Direct console very shortly when I do the demonstration. It's very intuitive and very easy to configure to protect your most critical workloads. And it's application aware, so you can back up, Exchange, SQL, and other applications and data types. And it supports physical and virtual environments, and we'll cover that in more detail in a minute. So the web-based console allows you to basically recover from anywhere, recover your data to any location that you need to, and it's, like I say, very easy to manage, and we'll show you that in a minute. The other service, of course, is a disaster recovery as a service, which is basically an extension to the backup as a service. So for example, you as a customer may say, we've got a site, we've got 50 servers that we need to back up, split between physical and virtual. But out of those 50 servers, I may have 10 systems that are absolutely tier 1 business critical, that in addition to the backup service, I also want to be able to provision them in the cloud for disaster recovery. So as a prerequisite for the DR as a service, you've got to have the servers backed up under the backup as a service. And this is an additional extra piece that allows you to provision and do switch across using site-to-site or point-to-site VPN connectivity. And as it says there, it provides push-button disaster recovery, both invoking the DR, but also recovering those systems back on-prem after you've been running for a period of time in the cloud. We can deliver very fast recovery time objectives for disaster recovery as a service, Providing everything has been set up and tested beforehand, which is part of our onboarding process for DR as a service, then the delay in doing the switchover is literally the time to provision and power on the VMs. So 5 minutes is very realistic, providing you've tested all your site-to-site VPN. We also provide automated DR testing as part of the DR as a service. So once a month, we will spin up your VMs to make sure that they power on, and we actually capture a screenshot of each login prompt when we do that automated DR test. So if you then want to just check that those systems have been tested, you can go into the disaster recovery tab on the Cloud Direct console and actually see a screenshot of the last time it was booted up in our data center, and you'll get the date and timestamp obviously from the login prompt of the server. So it's all about giving you that reassurance that we are regularly testing the integrity of those VMs and making sure that they power on correctly and are accessible. So what I'm going to do now is go into a bit more detail. So the key features of the backup as a service is obviously a direct to cloud, so we don't require any intermediary hardware to hold the backups locally. Having said that, we do have a feature in the product that allows you to store a local recovery point if that is something that you would like to do. So if you, for example, have a low-cost NAS unit lying somewhere on your network, we could utilize that to hold the last recovery point of key systems. And I suppose one of the benefits of doing that, if there was ever a problem with your internet connectivity, you would be able to recover offline if you hold a local copy. So we do allow that. We do facilitate a local copy to be held, but it is absolutely not a prerequisite. This is not a hybrid cloud solution where a prerequisite is to have a local copy first. We do absolutely support direct to cloud backup and recovery. It has built-in WAN optimization, as you would expect. So once we've taken the baseline image of all your physical and virtual servers that are backed up, we just then pick up the delta changes. So in a VMware environment, for example, we will use the change block tracking and the VMware APIs to do an agentless backup of the VMs, similar in Hyper-V. And for physical servers, we use a Cloud Direct agent to basically scan the server and just pull out the Delta unique blocks and upload them. So it's a very, very efficient process. And as I mentioned already, we do have a local backup option. The data and security is very tight. We provide AES encryption. We provide secure socket layers, HTTPS connectivity to the UDP Cloud Direct console. We also provide Google two-factor authentication when you log into the console as well. And I'll show you that because I have that set up in my demo lab. And you just download the Google authentication app onto your phone. And then when you log in, you have to put a 6-digit code from the app as well as your username and password to provide extra security that only authorized people could actually log in to that environment. We also have multiple automated backup validations. So we have a very patented system at the back end that guarantees the integrity of your data. And so what that means is if your data is good when it was backed up, we guarantee the data that you restore back from us will always be in a good state. So if your data was clean when it was backed up, it will always be clean when it's restored, and we guarantee that 100%. Web-based management, all the management into the Cloud Direct console is completely web-based. There's no Java plugins or anything locally. It has to be installed. So you can literally manage the service from anywhere in your environment, from an iPad, from your phone, from a desktop. You could be traveling, and log in and make sure everything's working as you expect. We've also got advanced reporting in the product, and I'll show you some of the reports that we can produce in there as well. We've also got different ways to recover the data. We can recover everything from individual folders and files on a file server, for example. We can recover the system state. We can restore complete volumes as image files like VHDX files, etc. And we can obviously restore VMs into Hyper-V and VMware as well. The solution is very comprehensive. It backs up SQL databases. We can truncate application logs. We can back up Exchange. So it's application aware. And it's very easy to configure. I'll show you this when we do the demo. In terms of platform support, we support physical environments. Physical support covers Windows Server and Windows Desktop, everything from Server 2003 all the way up to 2016, everything from Windows XP, SP2 all the way up to Windows 10. We also support physical Linux, covering CentOS, Debian, Red Hat, SUSE, Ubuntu, and we also support Mac operating systems as well, and lots of various versions and historical versions are supported. In virtual environments, we support VMware. The way we back up VMware is you download a virtual appliance, which is quite a small image. It's about 850 megabytes. You download it as an OVF template, and then you basically import that into your virtual environment. It works with both vCenter and DSXi. So if you've got a vCenter, you can register the appliance under your vCenter. And if you're a small site and you're just using VMware Essentials without a vCenter, for example, you can register it directly with an ESXi host. You run through a wizard to set up the virtual appliance. It's like 3 steps. You give it an IP address. You basically connect it into your cloud account in the Cloud Direct console. And then obviously you give it your credentials to connect into vCenter or the ESXi host, and that's it. Hyper-V is slightly different. We just use the Arcserve Cloud Direct agent installed on the Hyper-V hosts, and then that will allow us to pick up the VMs, which you can back up in 2 ways in Hyper-V. You can back them up agentlessly, similar to VMware, or you can back them up as image files. So you can say, for example, all my Hyper-V VMs are running on the E drive of this Hyper-V host, and you can put the path to where the VMs are located and back them up as direct images on the Hyper-V host itself. You can also back up the Hyper-V server itself and protect the operating system, etc., with the Arcserve Cloud Direct agent. So we've got good platform support, and I'll show you this when we do the demo in a bit more detail. Now, the DR as a service is the extension to the backup as a service. It can be used on a subset of your environment. You don't necessarily have to switch on DR as a service for every server that you're backing up. I foresee in a lot of scenarios where customers will say, we're backing up a fairly large environment, but we only want to use DR as a service on a subset of servers that are kind of tier 1 business critical, that would have to be running quickly in a DR situation. And everything else can be recovered from the backups. And as it says there, we provide push button recovery. It's all DIY for disaster recovery. Once the system's been tested and validated by our cloud team, the whole invocation of the DR is managed by yourself. You don't have to phone a service desk and request your environment to be spun up. It's all done directly from the portal. We've talked about the RTO in 5 minutes, and I'll show you this when we do the demo. It's very easy to do that. We provide automated DR testing. It provides unlimited scalability. It's essentially, we'll come on to how we license this, but as long as you've got the right resources in place, our cloud data center can facilitate very large environments. So it would never be an issue that we don't have enough space or your VM's too big or anything like that. If you want to do this and use our service, we'll be able to facilitate very large environments, as well as small defragmented or decentralized environments for customers as well. This supports both backup, failover, and failback. The failback is a really important part of the service as well, because we've really come up with a very innovative way that if you do a switch over to our cloud and spin up VMs for disaster recovery as a service, you have to then look at beyond that. So what happens in a scenario that you've been running for 5 days in our cloud, you get your infrastructure resolved, and you say, right, we want to come back on site now. We want to bring back, but we don't want to bring back the last backup because that could have been a week old. We want to bring back the VMs, what we're running in the cloud, back on site. So we allow you to recover back whilst the VMs are still running in the cloud. But then just before you do the switch back, it will pull back the delta differences from the time you downloaded the image to the time that you actually switch back. So you could have downloaded the VMs, which are large, earlier in the day in preparation for the failback. But at the time that you're actually ready to invoke the switch back, it will sort of calculate what changes have happened in the last 2 or 3 hours or whatever the time difference is, pull them back, and then when you switch back, you're switching back to the latest point in time, not a 3-hour delay, you know, from your RPO, etc. We have Active Directory integration, so we can integrate AD services, but we can also redirect port services for like email, SMTP, and other services as well. So if your environment fails on site, you can get authentication and activity around messages and using ports in our cloud to take over that service as well. It encompasses physical and virtual, as we've already discussed, and we can pre-provision the virtual customer cloud by using our site-to-site VPN connectivity or point-to-site, and I'll explain in the demo more about how that works. So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch across to my demo lab. So just 2 seconds, I've gone past it. So here you can see this is the UDB Cloud Direct console. I've been logged out. It will automatically log you out if there's not been any activity on the console for security reasons. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to log in, but you'll see at the bottom there it's asking for a 2-factor code. So I have to go to my phone, which I'm doing now, launch the app to get my code, which I've got here. So I'm just logging in. Oh, it's just changed. 6.2. Okay. Oh, it's just changed again. So it basically refreshes the code about every 2 to 5 minutes. So you've got to be quite quick to get the latest one. Anyway, here we go. So I'm signing in now. Now the first thing you'll notice, it will take you to what we call the Systems tab, and this is basically the servers that you're managing in the cloud for both backup and recovery, and potentially for disaster recovery, and we'll come on to that in a minute. Now, when the first time you log in, you will have an empty console because there won't be any nodes or agents registered in the console. So what you need to do is you need to download either the appliance. If you're a VMware customer, you can download this OVA template, which is about 850 megabytes download, and this will allow you to install and configure the virtual appliance in your VMware environment. And then for the rest of your environment, you can download the Arcserve Cloud Direct agent. And you can see here we have Windows, Linux, and Mac. For Hyper-V environments, it would typically be a 64-bit agent that we would download onto each Hyper-V host. And then, you know, if it's a 32-bit system, you can download that, for example, a laptop or a desktop, or an older server maybe that's running still 32-bit hardware. And as I say, the Linux support's quite long and wide. You know, we've got various different formats, and the same for Mac OS X. And basically, when you install the agent, it kind of, the first thing you need to do is put in your Cloud Direct login credentials. And what it does is it registers the agent into the console as you're doing the install agent setup. So then once you've basically installed the agent, you then have to go in and configure the backups. So if I go on to, for example, this server here, which is my Exchange server, the first thing you need to select your backup volume. Now I've got 2 volumes in my cloud. I have a general backup and recovery volume, which has a retention policy, and I'll show you that in a minute. But if you're also wanting to spin up the systems for disaster recovery, a prerequisite to that is that the data has to be backed up to what we call a disaster recovery volume. And the disaster recovery volume is slightly different to a general backup volume in the fact that this file system is what we provision from to spin them up as VMs in the cloud. So if your server is just going to be part of the backup as a service only, you can back it up to a general backup volume. But if it's going to be spun up for disaster recovery as well as being backed up, it needs to be backed up to the DR volume. Then you can set your backup schedules. Now, if you're signed up only to the backup as a service, you get a 24-hour RPO. So you can select the days of the week that you want to back up, you know, and then you can select your backup start time. It's very simple. If you sign up to the DR as a service, you also get the option to back up every 6 hours, every hour. And we've also added, which is a new improvement that we've made by taking some of the core UDP technology, an RPO of up to every 15 minutes. You can also set up network throttling. So you can see here I've got different network throttling rules. It's very easy to set up. You just put in the amount of kilobits per second that you want, and then the start and stop time of when you do it. So you can have different rules stacked upon each other. So for example, I have 2 rules there. So it's using 6 megasecond between, 3 megasecond between 0600 and 1800, and then 6 megabits per second, 60 megabits per second between 1800 and 2300. So you can set the rules there. And then you've got advanced options. The advanced options allow you to do things like if you want to hold a local backup into a NAS share or somewhere local, as well as replicating to the cloud, you can enable that. We have a very clever WAN optimized Delta technology to upload just the changes, and that uses a cache installed basically in the same directory where the UDP agent's installed. So for the cloud direct, but if you want to customize a location for that, you can do that as well. Sorry, my phone Siri just woke up there. And you've also got other options as well around what you actually want to back up. So at the moment, I've got the operating system being backed up, and obviously the Exchange database, because this is an Exchange server. But you can also add different backup tasks. You can back up the system state. You can back up specific folders and files. You can back up SQL. You can back up Hyper-V. We can also back up network shares. It says NetApp. It was designed originally for NetApp, but you can actually back up any NAS share as long as the shares are registered with a Windows server. So the first step to that is you would map a drive from the NAS share to your Windows server, and then you would select that option, and then you can select the share or the map drive to back up through the Windows Cloud Direct agent. You can also launch pre and post backup scripts in the backup tasks as well. So once you've configured the backups, it's pretty straightforward. You then save the backups, and then it just basically cracks on with what you've asked it to do on the schedule that you've defined, and also the throttling rules that you've defined. So it's pretty straightforward. And here, for example, when you come to do a restore, there's different types of restores you can do. So if you wanted to recover, for example, files and folders, you just select the current browse recovery point. And then what this does is it launches a file browser, and I can then go in. So in there, and then you can see I can go in and recover files and folders. This is actually my documents folder running on my laptop. And in there, you just right-click the folder, and there's 2 ways to restore. If I double-click on the folder, it'll download it in the web browser straight to my current location where I'm connected, i.e. from the browser. Or if you say restore using the replication agent, it will actually put the agent back to the original location using the agent to facilitate the restore. So it's very easy to recover files and folders on a machine. But you can also do things like VM level recovery as well. So if I wanted to restore a VM, for example, this is a Windows VM running in VMware, you can either restore it as an image or files and folders as part of that image, or you can restore it back to, for example, your vCenter. So in my case, I could click on that, launch the file browser to select what I've backed up, and then you just go in through your vCenter group, select the VM that I'm interested in, so it was this one, and then I just go in and then I select the image, and then I say restore using the replication agent. Then I select my virtual appliance, which that facilitates the restore as well as the backup. I can then select my data store that I want to put it in, and then basically it will start the restore. So you can do VM level recovery, and Hyper-V is quite similar. It restores it as a VHDX file back onto the Hyper-V host, and then you can just power it on. So it's really easy to do system recovery as well as granular file and folder recovery as well. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the tabs and explain how things work. So we have a virtualization tab. This is basically where you register your hypervisors. So I've got obviously the virtual appliance for my VMware lab is registered here. It will automatically pick up the VMs that are detected when it does its scan. And then you enable which VMs you want it to back up. So you can enable and disable the VMs. It's quite simple. You can actually bind the appliance to a specific host or a specific data center under your vCenter. For example, if you had an environment, I was speaking to a customer the other week, and they had a data center managed by vCenter, but they also had remote sites with an ESXi host at each site. And the question is how can we ensure that the virtual appliance will only back up the nodes at each site and send it straight to the cloud, won't try and pull it into a central vCenter. And the idea is we can register multiple appliances and then bind it to a specific host or environment, and that way it will send the data straight to the cloud. You can get it to auto sync new VMs, so if you're deploying new VM templates out for the business or you're decommissioning old VMs, it will basically be dynamic in the fact that any new VMs get added will be backed up, and any deleted VMs will be removed from the policy as well. And you've got the same configuration steps when you're backing up VM as you do any other server. You can set your schedules, your throttling rules, etc. in there. And Hyper-V is very similar. If you go into Hyper-V, you get a similar view. You can switch on the VMs that you want to back up, auto sync new VMs. You've got all your configuration schedules exactly the same. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to come back to disaster recovery at the end, and I'm going to continue just to talk about the volumes. So this is where you set your retention policy. So under the volumes, you can select the servers, and then you can go in and customize how long you want to keep your daily backups for, your weekly backups for, your monthlies. You can also have yearly schedules if you want to keep yearly end of year backups. You can also set hourlies or 4-hourly backups in that volume as well. There's also default templates if you want to use those as well. If you just wanted a standard 14-day retention, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year. So a lot of these granular options are predefined for you if you want to do that. And you can see there you could select a 10-year policy, for example. And then you've got the disaster recovery volume. This is set for a monthly high frequency backup. So it's only keeping a month's worth of retention on the DR, because if you think about it logically, disaster recovery is about, for most customers, is spinning up to the latest version to minimize data loss, or the worst case scenario, if you've had a ransomware attack or a malware attack, you may want to roll back 24 hours at the very most. So the retention policy tends to be shorter on the DR volume, but again, you can specify, whatever you want there. So in terms of usage, we have usage reports that show you the baseline data, which is a darker color, and then the changes on top of that, and it's kind of like a rolling line graph, so you can go along it and get an idea of how long you've been backing up for, how the data's changed over different periods, and you can move for different months throughout the year. So if I wanted to go back to November, I could see November's data, etc., and go forward. So you can do all that, and it gives you a good understanding. Now, we also have a report center. The report center is quite good. I will try and bring up a quick daily digest. I shouldn't be showing my personal emails here, but I've got nothing to hide, I suppose. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go down to, where are we? The here we go. I'm just going to go to, just click, sorry about this. I'm just going to select sort by from. There we go. Yeah, so this is just basically showing a backup event notification, but there's also what we call a daily summary report, which is quite nice. It gives you a kind of summary of what's backed up. Now on this particular day, I wasn't doing any backups because my storage lab was switched down, but I'll pick another one here. Hopefully I'll find one with data on. Nope, that's another blank one. Okay, just 2 seconds. I should have prepared this a little bit better. There you go. So on that day, I backed up my laptop, and what you normally see for a production environment is every day it will give you the backup status. It will say if there was been any warnings or errors. It will tell you how long the upload took. It will tell you how much data has been processed and how much was actually transferred. So in that case, it scanned 265 gigabytes of data, but it only uploaded 146 megabytes of actual changes. So it's very efficient in the way that it works. So we've got that. You can also create alerts for backups, for restores, etc. And there's also very specific reports around your volume retention, account activity, about who's logged in, who's logged off, etc. And that kind of leads nicely onto users. On the users, you can create role-based access into the console. You can create an admin user, which is a full access to everything. A storage user. Storage users are allowed to manage their storage details, example, volume retention, browse recovery points, and create and edit support tickets, but they're not allowed to change the backups or anything like that. And then you can create restore operators. So I actually created a restore operator, and in there you can actually control what systems the restore operator is allowed to restore as well. So you can limit what systems that user has got access to in terms of his day-to-day restores. Now, what I'm going to do now is talk more about the disaster recovery piece. So in going back to the systems here, you can see on the console that a number of systems have got a tick next to them saying disaster recovery. They're the ones that I've enabled for DR already. And to enable a system for disaster recovery, you just press the blue button next to the server and say enable disaster recovery. Now the first thing you've got to do is allocate the amount of RAM you want that DR system to have. Our general recommendation is whatever the amount of RAM is it's using in your production environment, you should allocate the same amount of RAM for the DR system to run in our cloud. Otherwise, you know, if you put less in there, it's going to run slower. And ultimately, you want to have a positive experience that the VM running in our cloud has the same performance as your on-premise server, physical or virtual, that you're protecting. So we recommend to do that. You also have to declare what licenses this system is running. So for example, we share this information with Microsoft to keep us in compliance. So you could say, okay, well, it's a Windows server, so it's running server standard. In addition to that, it's also running, you know, SQL, and I can select what version of SQL it's running, and any other applications. It could be running SharePoint or whatever. And then that we have an audit log of what licenses we're protecting on those systems, and we share that information with Microsoft, and that gets saved. Now, once the systems are saved for disaster recovery, you can then go into the disaster recovery tab, and those systems that you've enabled for DR, as soon as they've run a backup to the DR volume, they will be listed here as idle VMs, i.e. they're enabled for disaster recovery, but they haven't been provisioned yet. And in here, you can see one that I've already provisioned earlier to show you what it looks like, and it will show you what, you know, its IP address, you know, last backup, etc. It has all sorts of information. Now, before I go into showing you what it looks like when it's running, we also have the network connectivity here. The most common scenario is what we call a site-to-site VPN. And what this does is that you download a virtual appliance which can run in VMware, Hyper-V, or VirtualBox. And once that appliance is installed, our networking team that work in the cloud will actually do a remote session with you to help you set that up and configure it. Because if you're not familiar with networking, it can be a bit of a minefield. So we have experts that will actually do a remote session with you, understand your network topology, and actually work with your networking team and your storage team to get it all set up properly, and then they will test it. Typically, when our VMs are running in our data center, they're running on a private subnet, but then when you invoke DR, we can do IP switchover and take your production IP addresses and apply them onto our VMs. So if you're on your network and you're pinging a server that's failed, you will ping it on the same IP address as what it runs locally, and it will actually ping the server in our cloud. We will translate that via our site-to-site VPN appliance to keep it all singing and dancing. So it's quite straightforward once it's configured and set up. But that's a real prerequisite to making sure that everything's very smooth in a DR. And then basically you select the servers that you want to activate for disaster recovery, i.e. you want to provision. So you press, for example, I can go here and say, okay, I want to activate that. And it says choose a recovery point. So the last one was this morning. I took a quick snap sync. So that's activating, and in a second that server will be listed here as a server. Now once the server's been listed, if you want to connect to it, you can launch a remote console. So I'll click on that. It's asking for a password, so I just press show here, select the password from the list. This is not the actual password of the VM, this is just the password for the session to connect to it. So I can just paste that in there, press OK. And then it just takes about 30 seconds to connect. And what you'll do is I can log in, I can see the VM running, etc. And it's really easy. So this proves that the VM's running. As I say, as part of that automated DR testing, we will spin it up automatically every month anyway into our environment, and we take a screenshot of the login prompt, so you can then make sure that that the system is powered on regularly. So you will get a remote console like this, and then I just press again Control-Alt-Delete. Now you enter your local or domain password that you would use on-prem into the VM, and then you can see there's the VM running, and it's just exactly like it is in my VMware environment that I have in my storage lab. So it's exactly the same system. And it's ready to go. And then obviously when you're finished with that, you can basically start that recovery process. So you can start the failback process, and this will start to download the VM even whilst you're running it still in the cloud. It will start downloading it into your environment. But then when you're ready to switch back the service, it will pull down the incremental changes just before you're ready to switch back. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to log out of this. I'm just going to power it off actually. Sorry, just shut down. There we go. And then it will log off. There we go. So I'm just going to let that do that. So you've got the full disaster recovery service, and you can see all this is self-managed by yourself. There's no third party you have to contact to get this all invoked. You initiate it all yourself, so it's pretty straightforward. So that's kind of me done. I just wanted to give you a run through the console, show you what it's like, and I suppose show you how easy it is. I first touched this product in late November without any training from anybody. I think within about the first few hours, I'd registered about 12 systems. I was backing them up. I was doing test restores. It is very straightforward, and I think for any half decent storage guy, that's used to backup software, they will not have any problems using this console. It is very, very intuitive. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the presentation and hand back to Tony Parry. Tony, are you there?
Thanks, Charlie. Whilst Charlie catches his breath and catches up on things, he'll take a look at your questions. And what I'll do is go through the pricing and licensing. And after that, any of the questions that you've put on chat, we'll be able to come back around to. So in terms of pricing and licensing, So backup as a service, it's actually priced per terabyte of data that's in the cloud. So in terms of what's actually in the cloud, it's obviously going to be a different amount to how much you've got on premise. We have it available in different quantities, ranging from 1 to 50 terabytes. If you have 4 terabytes requirement in the cloud, then you're probably more cost efficient to go for 5 terabytes. It is on a decreasing ratio of costs, or average cost per terabyte, as you go up. The pricing is based on annual subscription, so at the end of each year, you obviously need to rebuy it again. It's not perpetual with maintenance renewal on top of it. Effectively, it's just like the normal SaaS solutions. It's a rental model. Now, there are a few considerations that you need to make. The considerations are we don't incorporate data deduplication, and so the actual amount of storage that you'll need is based on effectively the source data, plus any changes that you make over time, obviously, plus the recovery points. So a rough rule of thumb is that if you have 1 terabyte of source data, then you'll probably need about 2 terabytes of cloud storage for it, but we have priced it accordingly. Okay, the DR as a service, that's actually based on, it's an add-on, as Charlie said, to the backup as a service, so you can't just have DR as a service by itself. And the licensing for that equates to how much RAM your systems have got. So if you're only going to protect one system and it has 4 gigabytes of RAM, then you'll need 4 gigabytes of RAM in the cloud for being able to stand in. Again, we've done different licensing to accommodate different prices, ranging from 4 up to 32 gigabytes of RAM. And let's say you have 64 gig of RAM in total across multiple machines. Then if you took 2 of the 32 gigabyte of RAM modules, that will allow you to be able to put that into the cloud and stand up the systems. And obviously with the DR as a service, you're then able to have the monthly automated DR testing with reports that will be sent back. There is also an Active Directory server option that you can take, and again, it's based on annual subscriptions. Some considerations. If you take this solution, you need to stand up a system. Obviously, it's an annual subscription basis, but we will allow you up to 1 month's usage for a stand-in system. So if you have a system failure and you stand up the stand-in system for 1 month, then later down the road you have another outage. Obviously, that's the 1 month that's kind of used, and a month is pretty reasonable over the course of a year. As I said, the pricing is actually calculated by the total amount of RAM that you've got. So depending on the number of systems you've got, just add up how much RAM there is, and that will be the license that you'll need. And next, I thought it would be useful just to make sure that there's an understanding of comparing apples with apples. Obviously, if you're looking at a backup solution, if you look into the market and do Google searches or whatever for cloud storage, obviously you can get cloud storage from pretty well anywhere. But cloud storage alone isn't backup as a service. Cloud storage will just give you a repository. You'll need some kind of mechanism to drive your data in an orderly format that will allow you to manage and monitor what you're doing. And that's where data protection technology comes in. And there are 2 ways to do it. One of the ways is the hybrid solution. That's where you have an on-premise backup technology coupled with a cloud element. This usually encompasses having a backup system, so hardware, plus the software to drive your backups locally, and then replicate the backup sets into the cloud. And now once it's in the cloud, of course, you're going to need, if you want to have a stand-in system, you'll need both storage and compute. We do offer that as a solution. That's from our standard Arcserve UDP technology. That incorporates the data deduplication and on-premise backup with the replication to a separate location. And that can go into pretty well any cloud. Arcserve UDP, if people do want to have a local copy, as Charlie said, you can do that. It's obviously not as sophisticated a solution as a true hybrid model, but obviously there's a cost differential. When you have a hybrid model, you have to pay for the additional hardware, plus the software, plus the management overheads. There is another gotcha that you need to consider when you're looking at solutions, and that's a number of cloud providers do charge for any time you want to bring data out of their cloud, whether that's a complete system or just files, and it can become very messy. So actually having a solution that's been specifically designed for acting as a backup service and DR service is far more beneficial in a lot of cases than trying to create your own around cloud providers that are out in the market that will start tying you up in a lot of red tape and forcing you to pay extortionate amounts of money for actually delivering a service that should be standard. And we've heard that feedback a lot from our clients. So they're just the gotchas. So I'll pass back now to Charlie, who hopefully has had time to look at some of the questions that you've put forward. Charlie, are you there?
Hi, Tony. Sorry, I was on mute there. No, absolutely. We've been getting quite a number of questions. I've been answering a lot of those in the background, and I'll read some of the questions out that we got. One of the questions: Do we offer a seeding service for the backups? At the moment, we don't offer a seeding service in the UK, but after speaking with the team based in the US, they have offered seeding before to customers. So that's something that we are looking at, and hopefully we will have a seeding service available in the UK in the not too distant future. Okay, that was one question. How do we set up the number of recovery points? And I said we did actually cover that in the demo. You select volumes, and then you go to the various backup volumes, and you can specify how many daily, weekly, monthly, hourly, yearly recovery points you want to retain on a volume. And any backup that's pointing to that backup volume will adhere to that retention policy. So I hope that's clear. And it says, can we make plans to assign to multiple machines? And I said, no, a plan is set to the agent, so one plan per node, or per set of VMs, So if you want to have different policies for different VMs, you could do that on having a different appliance, having multiple appliances deployed. At the end of the day, we don't charge anything for the virtual appliances, so you could actually deploy as many of those small VMs as you want, split the backup across different appliances, and having a different RPO and RTO, so across those. For different groups of VMs if that's needed. You can also, that was a question from one of our Australian distributors, if we plan to have the service in Australia, and I says in the future we're planning probably to have a Australasia hub, but at the moment it's the US and the UK, but you could use these in the short term. One customer had signed up for a trial version but couldn't see the virtualization tab in the Cloud Direct console, and I just asked them to contact the cloud support team and they'll be able to enable that for him. Also, what RPOs can we expect when we're doing the replication back to the main site? And I said a few minutes at most. It's literally the time you would pull back the image, and then just before you switch over, it would pull back the delta changes since you downloaded the image to what the current state of the VM is in the cloud. It would pull back the differences, they get applied, and then switch over. So we're talking a few minutes if it's done properly. How is a solution sold? And I said it's exclusively sold through our two-tier distribution network, as we sell all the Arcserve products. We don't sell direct. We're an exclusively channel model for our software, so it's sold through our resellers and our partners. And hold on, we've just got another question here. Okay, it was just a feedback from one customer saying that they're just looking for a laptop solution to back up, etc. But that's some of the questions that we've had so far, and I've been trying to keep on top of those, Tony. Hold on, there is a few more. I've just scrolled down. If the server has a dirty shutdown, will we have to do a full backup like UDP on the next backup? That's a good question, Drin, but I don't think we do. I think we just scan the volume as we would before and just pull out the delta changes. Okay. How does bandwidth usage compare to UDP RPS to RPS replication? It's actually quite similar in many ways. We're only pulling back the unique delta changes. Obviously, with a normal Arcserve UDP RPS to RPS, you have dedupe built into the replication. We don't use the same technology at the back end. It's basically we're using a kind of single instance storage backup volume in the cloud, but it is very efficient, and you would provide a similar kind of capability and experience. And then there's some questions about need to calculate the full source of the data size for the backups, etc. And has the backup been tested in Hyper-V 2016? We do support Windows Server 2016 and Hyper-V. We don't support Hyper-V clusters at this time, but we are looking at that in development. And that's the question so far, Tony.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time. I hope you found that useful. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to come through your partners and we'll get them answered. Thank you again. Have a good week.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.